You know, I've never really been much of a fan of the Flintstones. I have nothing against the Hanna-Barbera cartoons in general, but I never really found many of their shows particularly interesting, regardless of their unique premises. But saying that, I used to rent one of the Flintstones games on the NES all the time, Surprise at Dinosaur Peak. It was a fantastic game that I found challenging yet fun. It's a shame that the game goes for truly ridiculous prices in today's markets, but even so, I hope to get a copy one day. But the other Flintstones NES game, Rescue of Dino and Hoppy, is much less damaging on your wallet, and I picked it up last year at Too Many Games. Until the past week or so, I didn't have any experience with it, but I figured that it had to have been at least close in quality to Surprise at Dinosaur Peak, right? Well, not quite. In this iteration of the Flintstones, some weird scientist from the future kidnaps Fred and Barney's pets, Dino and Hoppy, and sends them to the future, where they are placed into a zoo exhibit. The scientist also breaks Gazoo's own time capsule and returns to his time period to rake in the money to pay for his own copy of Surprise at Dinosaur Peak. It's up to Fred to find replacement parts for Gazoo's time machine so that he can rescue the dino pets. Let's take a minute here to talk about this. We play in a prehistoric time, yet there's a guy with a time capsule that arrives from the Jetsons' times and steals dinosaurs. I'm sure in the future he could just pull a Jurassic Park and reanimate dinosaurs, can't he? Yeah, the premise of the game is a bit out there, but I suppose that's part of the fun of the cartoons. Anyway, the game plays as your typical platformer. Fred uses a club to bash enemies on the head and is able to leap around to various ledges to navigate the terrain. What's different with both Flintstones games over many other platformers is that Fred is able to clamber over ledges. How this works is that you find an edge of a platform that juts out just enough for Fred to grab onto. By leaping and holding the A button, Fred will clasp onto the ledge and dangle there. Once he stops swinging back and forth, you can press up while holding A to climb up to the platform. It's actually a fantastic mechanic that adds a bit of extra interactivity to the levels, instead of just bounding everywhere like a crazed Italian plumber. However, there is a drawback to this. Fred moves a bit slower than your average protagonist. Jumping over enemies to avoid them may sound like an ideal option due to Fred's slow attacks, but because he moves like a slug, and because a lot of the enemies are a lot bigger than him, evasion isn't ideal. This was a problem a few levels in, which I'll get to later. In any case, due to Fred's speed, many jumps that seem like he should be able to make easily are found to be, well, not so easy to do. That's why the ledge hanging is such an important mechanic. You absolutely need to master it, which isn't a big deal as you'll have plenty of practice to do so within the first few stages. Back to Fred's club. You wouldn't expect the caveman to have any other weapon, of course, but he does have a very limited range with it. There is also a slight delay between each strike, which can cause problems if you miss your first blow. Fred can also charge up his attack. Whether this is actually beneficial or not remains to be seen. I'm assuming against bosses it's ideal, but against the normal thugs you encounter in the levels, I found it to be unnecessary. But bulk up on those power increasing items just in case, because it doesn't hurt to increase the maximum power meter. So gameplay wise, the game functions well enough. But when you get to the bosses, well, the challenge level skyrockets into the absurd levels. I've fought Dark Souls bosses that I could figure out faster than these 8-bit creeps. Sure, some of the first few aren't so bad, but I'm ashamed to say that I couldn't make it more than 4 or 5 levels into the game. That's because the two bosses I keep going up against are like trying to knock down a brick wall with a styrofoam tube. When going up against these end-level enemies, the hitbox on Fred seems to be enlarged, as I was taking damage when I felt that I was safe. Not to mention that Fred's slow walking speed doesn't make avoiding enemy attacks any easier. But still, with the right sub-weapon, I was able to defeat a few of them. But between the caveman that drops rocks and throws fleas at you, and the woolly mammoth-like creature, I just can't progress any further. I think I was doing damage to the caveman by flinging the rocks back at it, along with regular strikes, but he was tanking my hits against Fred's measly max of 5 hearts. But the mammoth? I have no idea how to damage it if I don't have any sub-weapons. The club just doesn't have the proper range to get close and attack, as since the creature is constantly moving back and forth, no matter what, it will harm Fred. It also fires something at you, and I can't time it well enough to see if I can actually fling those back at it. So yeah, not even 5 levels in, and I'm stuck in the game. Didn't have this problem with Surprise at Dinosaur Peak, gotta say. At least there are infinite continues, so you can keep trying over and over again until success comes your way. Plus, to break up the maddening challenge, there are the basketball minigames that you can partake in. With these, you go one-on-one against one of Fred's peers in a game of hoops. Your goal is to have more points than the opponent after 30 seconds. The game is easy enough to play. Press B to shoot, and if you want to get some air before releasing the ball, simply press A first. On defense, press B to check your opponent, forcing him to drop the ball. You also need to time your shots, as the goal's gullet will constantly open and close, and if the ball strikes the bird when its mouth is closed, it'll just bounce off and force you to try again. Either way, this isn't a difficult battle, and if you fail, you can simply try again. Also, when you win, the enemy tells you that he'll give you a prize, but it's never explained what it is in the game. Instead, like me, you'll probably find out by accident. Somehow he grants you superpowers like higher jumps or the ability to fly. This is found in the pause menu. Now that I think about it though, this probably would have helped me to defeat the bosses, but hindsight I suppose. At least the game looks fantastic. Fred and crew look like they were taken right from the cartoons, and the stages are equally as colorful. There are no questions on what enemies are supposed to be, nor are you wondering what kind of landscape you're trotting through. The music on the other hand is actually kinda subpar, especially for a Taito game. The opening theme is recognizable, although it's no DuckTales. However, the level themes are just kinda there, and sound almost shrill in nature. Maybe better tracks are featured in the late game stages, but as far as I got, they're nothing that I'm going to want to get in my head. It's really a shame that I couldn't make it all that far in the Flintstones Rescue of Dino and Hoppy. The sequel is such a better game and one that I'd probably put in my top 10, so checking out the original is a bit eye-opening to see just what Taito did to improve its brother. That's not to say that this one is a bad game though. It still has some fun platforming, bright graphics, a selection of Quinn-powered sub-weapons, and of course, the extremely challenging boss fights. So if you want an NES Flintstones fix and can't afford Surprise at Dinosaur Peak, then Rescue of Dino and Hoppy may suffice. Final score? 4 out of 7. This is Reaper. Happy fragging.